And a very good morning to you. It's hard to believe it's already Thursday this week. The week is flying in, especially when you take Monday off. You can get in touch with us this morning on Twitter, hashtag OTBAM. 4-day weeks are the way forward. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt myself here. 4-day weeks are the way forward. They're brilliant.
I'm still feeling a little bit sleep deprived from Sunday night, to be quite honest with you. Well, you just never recover. It's just a constant state of permanent tiredness.
Yeah, well, it's just like having kids, Owen. Welcome to your future.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good motive for celibacy right there. So thank you very much.
Yeah, that, and you can also listen to, we do a dadcast? Anyway, let's move on because we've got plenty to talk about this morning. As ever, if you want to get in touch with us, we're live streaming on YouTube, we're live streaming on Periscope, and we're also on Facebook, as we are every morning. If you want to turn on notifications, we'll ping you a little notice every time that we go live across all of our platforms. And on top of that, you can now listen to us as a radio show every morning. You don't have to look at us bleary-eyed, bloodshot, tired, drooling. You don't have to do that. You can just listen to us doing the exact same stuff on offtheball.com. Hit the listen live. Plenty to get to this morning. The Ireland 15 has been named for the named by the papers, not named by Joe Schmidt just yet. The official Joe Schmidt notification will come a little bit later on this afternoon. But there was a big hoo-ha about Robbie Henshaw needs to be given a second opportunity to play, just to bed down, because otherwise we'll have abandoned this experiment straight away. And I was making the case that you don't actually have to do that, because why don't you just give him the opportunity later on to play another game at full-back and go, so that was your first test, get your confidence back, playing in your normal position, and then we'll try again, as opposed to, oh, your confidence is really low, we're going to throw you right in against Scotland, who have, pretty exciting outside backs who might be able to exploit some space in behind our full-back. Stick Rob Kearney back in, remind everybody that we're good, don't worry, the next time we experiment, everything's going to be all right. And that's what Joe Schmidt's done. I'm glad he's listened to us on a Tuesday. Yeah,
it seems that way. There's also the idea that we might actually have a better sort of order in midfield, that you'll have Robbie Henshaw returning to 12 and Donaghy at 13. Like we had this discussion the other day that I kind of wanted to see Chris Farrell potentially at 13 in a game like the England game where he could just punch holes through a defence. And you made the point that Donaghy can do that as well. But it's far more possible for him to do that if he's playing at 13 rather than closer to the out half at 12, right?
Don't know. I think that Bundy's going to be 12. I think Robbie Henshaw's going to come in at 13.
Really?
Is that not how the...
Oh, maybe it is. Maybe I've got that arseways.
I just think that he likes to... he doesn't really like... And also, they're very interchangeable, really. As Brian O'Driscoll said here when we were talking about the depth chart with him, he made the point that he would have played 12 sometimes. They would have had 13 on his back and they would have been largely interchangeable apart from at set specific moments. But when game flow is happening, it doesn't really matter what number's on your back because they were both able to do the same thing. I think... I don't know. It'll be interesting to see exactly what happens because obviously Robbie Henshaw has played most of his stuff at Leinster at 12 because Ringrose is so good at 13. But I don't know if you remember back when Robbie Henshaw burst on the scene, he was the new Brian O'Driscoll. He's the natural successor at 13 and I was like, well, what about this guy over here?
What order was it at Connacht? Aki at 12, Henshaw at 13?
Good question.
That's
that's what I think it was, yeah, because that's when he was the natural successor to Brian O'Driscoll.
The other element of this is obviously Quinn Roux starting when he wasn't even in the squad before the Six Nations was announced. I think, can I get the Irish Independent off you? I don't want to misquote somebody who you never want to misquote, but Neil Francis has a line on Quinn Roux this morning. He talks about Quinn Roux and he says the South African made just 3 tackles in 25 minutes. Courtney Laws came on at roughly the same time and made 9 tackles. How do we rate Courtney? Now he talks about Ireland potentially winning in Scotland, and if Ireland are to win in Scotland, an overpowering display by Ireland's front 5 is required. Tygart on one leg or Ian Henderson with one arm would be a better bet.
And Quinn Roux. Yeah. He doesn't like himself a bit of Quinn Roux. The only thing is that, the tackle count for that period of time, that was the one period of the game where we had loads of the ball because England were like, oh, look, we're kicking your ass. You can have the ball and you're not doing anything with it. So, of course, they were going to have more tackles, right?
Yeah, it's true. Also, as well, yeah, you're right. The possible team we're seeing here this morning is Henshaw 13, Aki at 12.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it's full-blown crisis if we lose this game either. The crisis has started. We need to throw all of our eggs in the World Cup basket and get on with it.
How many crises can we have in 1 year, basically?
Well, it'll be the same one. It'll start now. We will pinpoint the moment of you saying, what was it?
We need to get used to being superior.
Get used to it.
I see. I think we've got a bit of an identity crisis right now. Yeah, just because somebody suspects you're not superior doesn't mean you aren't superior.
We're back to plucky losers. That's what we are.
No, we're not.
Underdogs.
We never will be. We'll always be at the top of this mountain.
We should get those dog masks now and get the players walking in the dog masks.
That's a good shout.
Into I was going to say Hamden, into Murrayfield.
Have you been following Tom Brady's Instagram account throughout the course of the playoffs?
Just a bit where
Yeah, just himself and Gronk looking very smug into the camera. Ireland players should start doing that if this championship turns around for them. All it is just a knowing smile into the camera. It's still here. And I've got a sneaky suspicion that Ireland are still here.
Yeah, look, they haven't gone away, but at the same time, we ain't what we thought we were. We aren't able to just cruise through matches against England with their first choice team.
Well, that's all part. When I say we need to get used to being superior, that is part of that. When plucky underdogs come along and try and take you off your perch, that's just part of the game now. And maybe we just, as I said time and time again, I'm blue in the face from saying it. We need to get used to that. And like a team like Scotland, a worse team than England, by a fairly considerable margin, I think, will be looking to do the same thing. Now the venue obviously kind of puts things into their favour a little bit more. If this was in Dublin at the weekend, we would be talking backlash all the way. But because of what happened 2 years ago, you can't just be 100% sure of that.
Yeah. Okay, I want to move on to the GAA accounts which came out yesterday, and there's loads of good stuff in it. The Croke Park Stadium, which is a separate company, made, was it 11 million profit? That was the figure that was released in the papers?
The profit, I'm not quite sure. There was... I'll get that figure for you in just a moment. It's outlined nicely in the Irish Independent this morning. But in terms of the actual gate receipts, which is separate to Croke Park and commercial revenue, basically, as you say, the commercial revenues from Croke Park have allowed them to offset the deficit that they've made. So basically, the gate receipts are way down, despite the fact that there's been way more games. There's been some interesting quotes from John Horan. We may start with John Horan's quotes yesterday. He said, this is from RT Sport, they said, I think the condensed nature of the championship was a factor in the failure to actually pay at the gates, that we had so many inter-county matches in a small period of time. You have to realise that people's disposable income just can't stretch to all of that. 2 All-Ireland semi-finals on one weekend for hurling and for football. People probably just didn't have the revenue. Whereas if you go back to last month around the ticket prices, he says in any price increase in any business structure, and when you look at the ticket prices, you're talking about our product or games, there's always a risk that you may suffer an initial drop. But the economy is strong at the moment, and we felt that putting all things together, we needed a revenue stream. The economy is strong, and certainly we felt our games are popular. We felt this was the time. So there is a bit of a contradiction there in terms of pointing out that the economy is very strong, and then 2 weeks later, saying that people just don't have the money to actually handle the new element of Gaelic football and hurling.
Well, you can increase ticket prices.
It doesn't compute to me.
It doesn't make sense. Either you're consistent with we're increasing ticket prices because the economy is doing really well, or people stop coming to our games because the economy is doing badly. People don't have enough money.
I did have to, I saw Kieran Cunningham's good piece on it this morning in the Star. I just had to double check the John Horan quotes, to be honest with you, this morning, to ensure that he did say that people couldn't really afford the new structures basically in GAA, because it does go exactly against what he says. Like, the one thing that really got on my nerves last month about the ticket prices was not so much the economy comment. I'm sure that would have got to a lot of people who live in certain areas of the country that don't have an upturn in the economy just yet. It is the idea that this is the time. Now is the time to be increasing ticket prices, when clearly, as we've seen, there hasn't been a worse time to increase ticket prices, particularly when it comes to the football championship. Like, this is as bad as I can remember a Gaelic football product on an inter-county level in my lifetime.
The Dubs are being blamed for it in the back of the Indo this morning. So that's Martin Browney's headline, is Dublin's dominance hits GAA financial returns. So the sense here is that people don't want to go to games because the Dubs are too good and everybody knows what's going to happen. There's a sense of inevitability. You're spending your money to go and watch a tournament that we know the outcome in.
Yeah, which is as bad as sport can possibly be.
It's kind of pointless.
It's not what it's supposed to be about whatsoever. So we've seen the poor show at the Dublin game on Saturday night, probably offset by the fact that there was a huge Ireland-England game on at the same time, so you might give that the benefit of the doubt. But I'd be seriously worried about some of the attendances in last year's semi-final. I didn't realise until it was cited in the newspaper this morning that there was 81,000 at Dublin versus Tyrone in the All-Ireland semi-final in 2017. Like, it's very easy to hold up the idea of...
Was there?
Yes.
Wow.
I did not know that. Now, granted, the narrative was quite different, but it's amazing how things have changed in the space of 18 months in terms of Dublin going from the best team in the country significantly to being a complete walk-on favourites, you know? Like
Why was the Dublin-Tyrone game? Why did everybody go to see that game? That's nearly a sellout.
So Tyrone had just hammered Armagh in an All-Ireland quarter-final. and Armagh are supposed to be quite good. And then everybody thought, wow, this Tyrone team is going to give Dublin the game that they deserve. Now, the thing is, over the last couple of weeks, we've heard this excuse that because Mayo weren't in an All-Ireland semi-final last year, that's the single biggest reason why revenue's down.
Mayo for having a down season and Dublin for being too good. That's the only reason this thing happened.
I'd like to have seen the attendance last year if it was Dublin versus Tyrone in the semi-final rather than Dublin versus Galway, because the other excuse is that, Galway football supporters don't travel, or the Dublin football fans are sick of it, of seeing their team winning. I think the second part of that is true. I think it would be very, very interesting to put a like-for-like comparison. Dublin versus Tyrone in 2018. I wouldn't have been surprised if there was 65,000 there, a drop of about 16,000. That is how quickly and precipitous the decline in the interest of top-level Gaelic football has been. It
is interesting, though, that the Dublin's dominance is now officially part of the narrative when the accounts are published to show you why they've lost nearly 5 million quid in gate receipts. So the quote here is from Dermot Ryan, the GAA's new finance director, obviously Tom Ryan's successor. He says a number of factors were at work, and this is the inverted commas bit, including the ongoing domination of Dublin in football, resulting in probable or perceived victories up to the semi-final stage. Basically, the Super 12s.
Super 8s.
Super 8s, whatever they're called. The 12 games in the Super 8s. The Super 8s, the provincial championship, not really that important anymore when it comes to this, resulting in probable victories or perceived.
It's strange, isn't it, how what's kind of glossed over as the media narrative actually becomes the GAA narrative. It's almost as if all those former players and former managers who have been scaremongering over the years were actually onto something. Like the idea that the perceived and probable victories has been brushed over for years as a nonsense, that it all comes in fits and bursts, and the Dublin thing will come to an end eventually. Now we've got the top brass actually referring to perceived and probable victories, which is really, actually, I was going to say it's demoralising, but it's actually encouraging that they've woken up to the idea that this is a massive issue.
Yeah, you get the impression that the lads who run the finance know exactly what's going on. They know exactly what's going on. Like Peter McKenna is coming out and saying managers blaming the Croke Park pitch are trying to deflect questions from the media, and he's dead right.
Yeah.
And the Croke Park company made 11 million profit before tax. So
Peter McKenna's quotes yesterday are actually great, talking about not being able to get a hotline to Jim Gavin to actually query him on his remarks about the Croke Park pitch last summer. Unfortunately, Jim Gavin did not pick up his phone to Peter McKenna, so he's awaiting a response to that.
Yeah, Jim's a very busy man. I think Peter McKenna's doing a great job, and I think that if that wasn't happening, then they wouldn't be able to step in and save Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and they wouldn't be able to step in and bail out Kildare and Galway and whoever else they've bailed out in recent years.
But it is quite I know this is a very kind of one-dimensional outlook on it. Just kind of as a final point on this, just looking at the breakdown of the figures, when you look at the income and you look at the expenditure of the GAA last year, so the income was €63.6 million, and then the expenditure was €63.1 million. I know this is a very one-dimensional view, but that's only a €500,000 surplus, and they've got this massive issue down in Cork at the moment, which is far more than €500,000 no matter what way you look at it. And it seems that words like unlucky have been used about it. If you're making a €500,000 surplus, and this is the big issue that you've got, isn't that a borderline financial crisis in the organisation?
Yeah,
it depends how they offset that debt, but
yeah, and I think that I don't think the 11 million Croke Park profit figure is automatically included in those figures. So I'd like to see the breakdown of that, and I'd also like to see how you've got to assume that the accounting makes the whatever the income is, it gets distributed, or at least it's being put in, a rainy day fund for the eventuality that there's a massive cost overrun of 20 million odd in Cork or whatever it's going to be. Okay, so we'll come back to this a little bit later. I want to play you this. It's Kieran Donaghy speaking last night about one of his ideas that might affect some proper meaning to the rule changes when it comes to the issues of black card and potentially moving the ball forward when it happens. Have a look.
Late on in football games is where most of the frustration happens, if even a game is within 3 or 4 points, because your black cards, your sin bins, whatever you want to call it, that's the one rule that I think is making a balls of it in essence. It's not delivering on what it's supposed to do. You're getting patted on the back for being in the sin bin with 3 minutes to go if you pull down a fella going through on goals. Mm-hmm. You were being patted in the back if you took a black card. That shouldn't be the way. So the 50-metre rule they have in the Aussie rules is the most simple rule to ref. No, you don't need boards, you don't need fourth officials. If a cynical foul happens anywhere on the pitch, the ref blows the whistle, runs 50 metres up the pitch, boys put down the ball, bang it over the bar, you're punishing the scoreboard, and all of a sudden you've teammates If you're on my team and you pull some fella down in the middle of the field and they go in and get a 13-yard free, I'm telling you, no, Joe, cut that out. We don't need a tackle properly. You know, maybe look at it that way. If the cynical foul happens inside the 21, if you get it and you beat your cornerback and you're bearing through and he pulls you down, automatic penalty. No cards, no fuss, no wasting time. The Aussie rules have it for if you don't give the ball back in the full. So if I have it and I'm fouled and if you have it and you're fouled and the ball spills to me, what happens in the GAA now is I kick the ball away or roll it away. The ref at the worst case would bring it up 10 yards. By that case, we've everybody back.
Yeah, it's exactly right. We seem to be taking the wrong bits from Aussie rules as opposed to the right bits.
Yeah, definitely. They're providing a scoring opportunity rather than taking a man down would be a huge incentive to any attacking team, and it would straight away reduce a lot of the cynicism that we see. The black card one is weird as well, because it's almost encouraged a different form of cynicism, that you get black carded. What do you then do when you're down to 14 men? Well, you start time wasting immediately, because it's not the same as a sin bin in rugby, because in rugby the clock pauses. In GAA the clock does not pause. So you've got a sin bin from whatever it may be, the 55th minute to the 65th minute. And it doesn't matter what happens in those 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes on the referee's clock. Whereas in rugby, when you're down to 10 minutes for the sin bin, it's 10 minutes of play because the clock stops on each occasion.
Yeah.
So I think the black card has actually encouraged different cynicism in that way.
And so the sin bin will as well.
The black card for a sin bin currently, that's what I mean.
Yeah, okay, yeah. All right, Kieran Donaghy joined Team Off the Wall yesterday. If you missed that announcement, we're absolutely delighted about that. It's big Isle day for us yesterday. Ronan O'Gara joined, Kieran Donaghy joined, and you're going to have some top quality sports content coming your way from the two lads over the course of the rest of the year and hopefully long into the future as well. I'm going to talk to both of them about stuff that isn't just their own sports too. Kieran obviously mad into a bunch of different sports. As you can see there from his casual explanation from Aussie rules, he's able to do that about NFL, he's able to do it about NBA obviously to an even deeper degree, so we're really looking forward to that. Now, here's what's coming up on the show this morning. We're going to talk to Anna Kessel at 9:15 this morning. A new initiative launched by Investec where they're giving €1,000 a month prize money to the best article or podcast or piece of content about women in Irish sport. Anna Kessel's helping to launch that initiative. It's all part of the 20 by 20 campaign to increase the coverage and attendance at women's sport by 20% by the year 2020. Travis Tygart, the head of USADA, has been speaking with Owen about the situation at Wada. It's a really wide-ranging conversation. Obviously Lance Armstrong comes up, Jon Jones comes up, loads of different aspects of the current anti-doping administration globally comes up. It's a 40-minute interview. The whole thing's going to be on YouTube for you in the immediate aftermath of the show this morning, and the first part of that conversation we're going to play out for you at 8:50. GAA Money Madness is what we're calling it. 25 minutes past 8, we'll get to that. Scottish Rugby with Tom English, just how cocky they must be in Scotland at the moment. That's coming in 7 minutes time. In the meantime, we're going to take you on a whistle-stop tour of the newspapers this morning. So I'm going to start with the Irish Independent. Dublin's dominance hits GAA's financial returns, and that's the quote that I read for you a little bit earlier on as well. Is that Aymeric Laporte? Yeah, it is. Aymeric Laporte leaping highest to put Man City 1-0 up during their 2-0 win last night. Carney back to number 15 as Schmidt makes 4 changes. So Conan O'Brien back in the back row. O'Brien replaces Van der Fleer, and Conan comes in obviously for CJ Stander and his broken face. Heading to the top, Man City see off Everton to leapfrog Liverpool in Premier League. The pressure's on. Liverpool fans are all like, oh, it's mad how the perception is that suddenly we're choking when we've dropped fewer points than Man City have. Now Man City are top of the table. It's like, it's not that you're choking, it's just that, you know, your ability to reproduce the form that you had when there was no pressure is not quite there at the moment that you're under pressure. I mean, maybe that's the definition of choking. I don't know. Peter McKenna says the Páirc Uí Chaoimh pitch is going to be fine for May and could yet host another league game. So it was clear, like, I don't know, I think there's probably fewer people in the country who know more about pitches than Peter McKenna does. So if you're coming at him as one of the managers, Kevin McStay was also quoted from a couple of years back as well. He ain't having it, and I think that might be one of the benefits as well of having Croke Park involved in Páirc Uí Chaoimh and stuff like that. They just step in and they go, no, not acceptable, we're going to move on. Carney and Roux set to face Scotland, and Nantes want cash for Salah. This is a story that has left Nantes and those people who are reporting the story coming in for a lot of criticism. Cardiff City are facing legal action from Nantes over their failure to pay the first instalment of the 15 million transfer fee agreed for Emiliano Sala, the striker presumed dead in a plane crash. And apparently Arsene Wenger is ready to take a job in football. He is still living in London, but apparently is not interested in working in the Premier League again. So that would leave director of football at Paris Saint-Germain. There's a German offer and maybe an international team.
Qatar? Qatar is like the cool new job that you just associate with every cool manager that's out of work right now.
Yeah, or it's absolutely grim and there's no way you should be helping to be a fig leaf for the administration. That
Nothing grim about gleaming Jules Rimet.
Gleaming Jewels, I think, is the remake was unnecessary. Vincent Clark in Ash's frame after batting shambles. So England cricket in crisis after not great tour to the Caribbean. City storm back to the top, and then Jesse Lingard and why he's playing with a smile on his face again. And then also the English players went out, had some drinks, had some darts, and beat the shit out of Ireland. That's all it took. A night of bonding.
What they played? I've missed this. They played
Brexit. They played a game of Brexit in the pub, and who was it? Who were they talking to? Somebody finished with a triple. Somebody got out with it. What? 320s? What? We had a room, played some darts, a couple of drinks, and had a real good time. I never really play at all, but I had a hell of a checkout. 3 doubles. I shocked myself. I didn't even know I had one.
Who said that?
Who did say that? Henry Slade. 2-try hero, Henry Slade. So there you go.
Henry Slade is annoyingly talented at this point.
Because he got 3 doubles.
Yeah. That's far better than his performance.
So that's the match reports from there. We don't really need to talk about that. Edelman's MVP shows NFL does not care about drug use. It's true. They don't. They really don't they don't care. And at least the NFL is upfront about it. The only drugs they care about are if you drink or if you smoke some weed. Josh Gordon's entire life has basically been ruined by smoking some weed. Julian Edelman takes God knows what to make him a better player, comes back, has the season of his life. Well, he doesn't have the season of his life, in fairness. He has the off-season of his life. He was fairly mediocre for most of the season. But then at the end of the year, after a long rest, he suddenly got really, really good again during the playoffs. It's amazing. Fair play to you, Julian Edelman. But no, Josh Gordon is he literally, there was one of the suspensions because he was supposed to be sober and had a beer on a plane and got caught. And that was the last thing. That was the final straw that broke the camel's back to send him off for a year the last time. But this time, I don't know what he was, and he's currently in rehab. And we'll get a ring for this year, but the chances of him earning the $100 million, $150 million that his talent deserved has been denied him because he liked to smoke spliff.
I'm not saying that this ever exists, but say if I was a witch doctor and I had very, very good substances that could enhance the performance of certain players, I'd certainly be packing my bags, moving my way into America right now and trying to get involved with some NFL team because there's no way you're going to fail. Of course, if you're a top-class athlete, you need to have a decent amount of talent to get you to where you are. But clearly, I'm not a top-class athlete. I would go and if I was living in the United States, I would go and do a pharmaceutical degree, get myself all the good stuff and just, buddy up to an NFL player.
What?
But of course, this has never happened before in the NFL.
Why would you do a degree? You don't need one.
Yeah, you don't need a degree. Well, exactly.
You need a brass plate that says doctor.
We just need to watch Catch Me If You Can a couple of times
Dr.
and just
Sheehan.
copy everything that Leo does in that movie and you're fine.
Yeah, I mean, look, Dave Hannigan wrote was it last week he wrote a piece about Tom Brady's guru, who was right there on the pitch and the first person that he actually got to. Alex Guerrero gets to him before Bob Kraft and before Bill Belichick and before Gronk. The first person he has a long, lingering embrace before he builds up to basically snog Robert Kraft. Anyway, apparently Croke Park are also buying the site on Clonliffe College, 38 acres, which is on Clonliffe Road, and it was announced last October by the Archdiocese of Dublin, but apparently the Vatican are going to sign off on this, and maybe the church will use the money to pay the reparations for all those children who were abused that still haven't got the money from the church all those years ago. But who knows where that money is going to go. Anyway, the land is right beside Croke Park. It's an amazing site. It's a greenfield site. People would have parked there for years, wouldn't it?
I think they still can.
Can they?
I'm not sure. But everybody knows, everybody's walked past it on the way to Croke Park. I've never actually set foot inside that gate. What is it? Just like one old house and fields?
I don't know. Is that where you would have been parking for years?
We never would have parked there. It would have been more closer to the city. But I've definitely seen cars coming out of there after match day. So I presume that it is a parking space. Except you'd be stupid to park there because you got to drive through thousands of people standing right in front of you.
Yeah, or you bring your sandwiches, you eat them from the boot of the car. You chat to people who are going around. You wait an hour and then off you go, and there's no traffic.
Well, you know, you got to, or else leave early and base the traffic, as they say.
I did always think, leave early, just like the Irish Rugby fans. I did always think that it would be an amazing site for like pre-match entertainment, proper, you know, put on a skills centre, have a bit of, you know, American style tailgating.
No, you can't be stealing from foreign sports, Ger. This is the GAA. We've got our own proud tradition.
Hang on, are we going to have penalty shootouts?
Well, let's not use the P word in this context around the GAA, because that requires a skill that's not native to our games.
Yeah.
Unless your tailgate idea has Irish dancers and Cayley music.
Well, I'd be happy. I'd be happy with that. You know, a bit of shandos.
Just people, kind of paddywhackery in our own backyard.
No need for paddywhackery. No need for paddywhackery.
What would your ideal tailgate be on Clonliff Road?
A pig on a spit.
Pig on a spit. Like, is it proper sort of people reversing their cars in, you know, jumping into fold up tables, smashing beer cans off their head?
I think perhaps you could have it like family oriented.
All right, okay.
A skill zone, a Saturday panel or two, a talk, check your heart rate, that kind of stuff. You know, sounds boring.
Sounds terrible. I am definitely staying wherever I go.
Okay, so over this side is the mayhem and the madness for the grown-ups, and over here is like, oh look, you know, we're cleaning out.
What I want is the Buffalo Bills parking lot.
Yeah, over on that side, fine, yeah. I mean, obviously, the Dubs are never going to go, so it doesn't really matter for them.
Well, and that would greatly increase the atmosphere around the place.
Aye, there you go. Why was that happening?
Well, because...
Do you hate the Dubs?
I absolutely despise the Dubs. I do not despise the Dubs. They drink down in...
They give you a home. If you hate Dublin so much, why don't you...
I don't hate Dublin.
As the Brexiteers say, if you hate this country so much, why don't you leave?
Like, there should be, you know, a special area for Mayo fans where they come in and they stamp their "I'm a superior fan to you" ticket into the tailgate, and all the rest of us, because we're inferior GAA fans to Mayo fans, of course, get to go everywhere else.
Because you win.
That's an unnecessary barb at Mayo fans this morning. But yeah, no, I think you need a little bit of work on your tailgate idea. Once you come up with a better product, come back to us.
No, that's it. I'm finished. Yeah, go on.
The Irish Daily Mail this morning it's a turn-off. The GAA counting cost of failing attendances, says Mark Gallagher. And Ireland look to veterans for Murrayfield trip, says Hugh Farrelly. City soar back to the top then is the picture there, as you can see on the back page of the Irish Daily Mail. Back page of the Mirror is aim for the top. Laporte and Jesus fire the Blues back to pole position. Got that Nantes story who want Salah cash. And we'll hammer race hate Yob. West Ham vow to act on Salah abuse. Back page of the Sun then is laptop. Emmerich powers up City title bid. And real insight for boss Stephen. So the Ireland Under-21s won 1-0 last night against an Irish amateur team in Stephen Kenny's first game in charge. The back page of the Star then is City lap it up. Pep says Blues will never give up after taking back top spot. While the back of the Mirror this morning is City at the summit again. Jesus preaches from on high as champs get back on top. And then finally this morning, it's The Guardian. Storming back to the top, says the headline. Laporte and Jesus strike to turn up City heat on Liverpool. And you've also got Jacob Steinberg reporting on that Mohamed Salah story. Islamophobia allegations. West Ham and police investigate Salah abuse.
Yeah, apparently the West Ham fans were coming for Jason Steinberg for reporting on the story as well, which kind of proves the point that they are racist.
Yeah, Jacob Steinberg, I think, is a West Ham fan. So they're like, oh, good person, you're throwing our fans under the bus. Well, I don't know what they're actually saying to him, but that's a fairly disgraceful thing to actually pick out a journalist for reporting on a racism story. I think there's only one person here who should be blamed, or one group of people who should be blamed.
Yeah, and here's the thing, the club need to take responsibility for it, as opposed to saying, oh, it's just a few bad apples, nothing to do with us. It's like, yeah, we're going to fix this, we're going to deal with this issue, and we're going to be the ones who actually try and fix it immediately. So, better hit mute on that before it goes off. Anything else from you?
No, it's just he has printed the comments on the back of The Guardian this morning. They're pretty awful comments, to be quite honest.
Okay, well, let's not give them any further ventilation. Now, Ronan O'Gara has joined Team Off the Ball. We made the big announcement yesterday. He came into studio with alongside Kenny Cunningham, actually, who was with us yesterday morning and yesterday evening. He's the hardest working man in show business, our Kenny. If you haven't seen or heard the full interview, it's on our website, offtheball.com, and it's definitely worth seeking out. Here he is talking about the challenge that Ireland face in Murrayfield this weekend.
It seemed like that Ireland were kind of tailing England in a lot of departments, which if you go to Murrayfield, there isn't a ground in the Six Nations now. I'd say that it's a tricky game Saturday.
Well, that's what happened the last time. They got 2 early tries and the game was effectively over when we got laid off the bus. So you've got to start this game well.
Well, especially over here. You mightn't win the game in the first 20 minutes, but you could lose the game. You know what I mean? So, if Ireland stay within 1 score of them, everything is fine. But you go back 2 years ago, within 30 minutes, it was it
3 tries? Or was
I think it was maybe 2 penalties on the try, was it?
Yeah, like the thing is, that's the first half an hour of the entire Six Nations that season. We saw what happened in the first 90 seconds of the Six Nations this season. Is there a thing where we just need time to build into a Six Nations championship?
All the evidence probably points to it, but from a sporting point of view, you can't really have that, because it's going to be Scotland in the World Cup. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With respect, you can't kind of build into that. You got to be gung-ho for that game. And then there's a bit of a taper off, isn't it? And then go again.
Yeah, so that was Ronan O'Gara, the newest member of Team OTB, talking to us in studio yesterday about the challenge that Ireland are going to face against Scotland this weekend. And I guess everybody has in their head the memory of that unbelievable opening to the game the last time when Scotland cut us open at will in the first 20 minutes. And the madness afterwards of blaming the traffic and the bus and some weird conspiracy for the organisers preventing Ireland from getting into their routine, and just how easily we were put out of our routine.
Yeah, there was also the line out early on in that game, which kind of summed up how Ireland just got completely caught cold. It was like, whoa, that just happened. Oh my God, we're losing to Scotland. And then we never managed to salvage the result at all.
Yeah. Tom English is with us this morning. Tom, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm very well.
I presume that we'll be getting to the stadium an hour earlier than we should be this time.
Well, I think it might be an idea if they set off a little bit earlier than they set off the last time. I can tell you something behind the scenes. The Scottish Rugby Union guys were having none of this the bus was delayed nonsense a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and rightly so. It was like the worst case of deflection you've ever seen, because Scotland were brilliant that day and Ireland were just really poor.
They were, yeah. And Vern Cotter was the Scotland coach back then, and he, even though himself and Joe Schmidt are big pals, he took a pretty dim view of what he thought was Ireland talking down a terrific win for Scotland. And that kind of resurfaced again during the week, didn't it? With Tadhg Furlong was put in an awkward position, and he looked pretty awkward in dealing with that question. But I think everyone in Ireland should forget that Joe Schmidt ever mentioned anything about a bus 2 years ago.
Yeah, because the thing is that one of the... Just having a bit of trouble with that Skype there. I guess the thing is, Tom, there had been such maybe a decade-long period where the Irish provinces were so dominant against the Scottish teams that we came, as a matter of course, to expect victory against Scotland. And to be fair, the international team would generally, with occasional and the Triple Crown denying victory at Croke Park, definitely sticks in the memory. But there were very few windows where Scotland actually were showing any signs of progress. Their whole system seemed to be broken. Our system was great, ergo we were the superpower, and they were just an annoyance along the way, a speed bump. Since then, they've got really good.
Yeah, I mean, Scotland have won, I think, two of the last three at Murrayfield against Ireland. And Ireland are the model for Scotland in many ways, you know. Back in the 90s, Ireland were behind Scotland, but since professionalism came in, Scotland has fallen miles behind Ireland. And it's been a major problem. But over the last 3 or 4 years, things have improved an awful lot in Scotland. There is hope at the end of the tunnel now, under Vern Cotter and under Gregor Townsend. I'd say the gap has narrowed a little bit, but Ireland's still under there, obviously a lot better than Scotland there.
When Ireland got drawn in Scotland's pool in the World Cup, it seemed that Irish rugby fans were fairly happy with that, with Scotland and with Japan. I wonder if Scottish rugby fans were happy that Ireland were the top seed that they got.
They weren't displeased. But listen, everyone in Scotland knows how good Ireland are. I mean, they've had multiple pummelings in recent times against Ireland, mostly in Dublin, not so much in Scotland. So, I mean, they would look then, and certainly it's been reinforced now that Ireland are one of the top teams in the world. So there was no rejoicing, put it that way, when Ireland came out of the hat with Scotland. It's a rivalry that's developed, isn't it? I mean, it's not just the Joe Schmidt bus gate. There's been a number of things. Scotland not voting for Ireland in the World Cup bid. There's a lot of animosity between Glasgow and Munster in recent years in the Pro 14. So there's a lot of things that have been going on. I speak to a lot of Scottish players here, and they feel that the Irish media haven't exactly been overly fair to them in recent times. So there is an edge underneath the surface.
Are they right? Do they have a point? I mean, have the Irish media largely been ignoring the improvements in Scottish rugby?
I think probably over-egging it a little bit. But there would be a couple of people who'd be saying a few fairly unfair things. Like Scotland have come, we have to remember, Scotland have come from the most desperately dark place. I moved to Scotland in 2005 and there was no hope here. People were still, rugby people, salt of the earth rugby people, were still talking in 2005 about Scotland abandoning professionalism and just going back to the amateur structure because things were so hopelessly bad. Things are an awful lot better now. Vern Cotter kind of instigated the turnaround. Gregor Townsend has carried that on. Scotland at home are a dangerous beast. If this game was in Dublin, I would say it's pretty much not quite a formality, but Ireland should easily win. But because it's in Murrayfield and Scotland's record there is exceptional in recent times, it's a dangerous one for Ireland. Yeah.
The other thing that Scotland have done since that turnaround is that they play brilliant rugby. They're great to watch. They have attacking flair, and rather than stifle that attacking flair and try and play a possession game or a rooking game or whatever the hell, it's like, well, let's get the ball in the hands of our most creative thinkers and give them the freedom to make mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't fall in love with rugby, and nobody, I think, fell in love with rugby because of the bludgeon and the hits and the intensity and the attrition and all these buzzwords that we get nowadays. We fell in rugby because of the flair, the French flair, the Welsh flair, if you're old enough to remember it. You two clearly aren't, I am. And Scotland kind of represent that. They are a kind of like a throwback. They want to play the rapier style of rugby. They want to cut you open, not just batter your brains out. Now that's I'm sure not by choice. It's by necessity because they don't have the brutes in the back row and in the second row to play that type of game effectively. They can, if they had John Barkley and Hamish Watson in the pack, they would do a pretty good version of it, but they don't. So they have to compensate by playing this. What Gregor Townsend said when he came into the job, that he wanted to play the fastest brand of rugby in the world.
And like we have seen elements of that, haven't we, in terms of the flair that Scotland have brought to the pitch. And one player who stuck out last weekend surely was Blair Kinghorn. Is he set to have a Jacob Stockdale type season?
I'm really not sure, because I'm not sure Blair Kinghorn is going to start on Saturday.
Right.
Sean Maitland sounds like he's going to be fit. The team is going to be named at 2:00 today. That would put Seymour and Maitland as the starting wings with Kinghorn on the bench. I might have got that wrong, but Maitland certainly deserves his place in the team. Seymour's in decent form as well for Glasgow. Scotland's problem last week in the last 15 minutes against Italy, when they conceded 3 tries, was that the bench was really poor. Very inexperienced bench, players coming on the pitch who are not playing regularly for their clubs. So Townsend's big job this week was to get the cavalry out of the treatment room and into his 23, and I think he's bringing 3 or 4 new players back into the squad now.
And what was the true reflection of where Scotland are at the moment? Was it that first 40, 45, 50 minutes where they were brilliant? I mean, did they just rest on their laurels a little bit against Italy, which would be fairly natural if you're 30 points up?
I'm not sure. I think that would be pretty easy opt-out. I think it just showed that they were missing, from what I would consider their best 23, they were missing 8 of them against Italy. They're going to get 3 or 4 of them back this week, and so when they come on, so when Jake Kerr comes on at hooker, Jake Kerr making his debut, Fraser Brown is missing. When Adam Hastings is coming on to play 10, you're missing someone like Pete Horn. You're missing Johnny Gray off the bench. You're missing big players coming off the bench, and I think that's why Italy took advantage. Because Scotland's depth, when you're missing 8 of your 23, the guys underneath that, they're just not good enough at this level.
Yeah. The other thing we've been talking about the whole way through this is that Ireland are perennially slow starters into the tournament, and they got a punch in the mouth last week. So it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back. But for Scotland, there is the sense of confidence, and whatever that confidence engenders in the group. And it definitely feels like they feel like they're part of a movement at the moment, with a coach who believes in them and their skill set and who isn't talking them down. It just seems like all the materials are there for them to be able to beat Ireland this weekend.
Well, certainly at Murrayfield. When you look at their record since the last World Cup, they've played 16 games at Murrayfield. They've won 12. They've lost 4. The 4 teams that have turned them over: South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and England. And by a maximum of 6 points. So nobody has beaten them by more than 6 points at Murrayfield since the last World Cup. Now you look at Ireland. Ireland put them away handily in Dublin, but they don't do it in Murrayfield. Murrayfield has become a bit of a cauldron for them. I'm not saying Scotland are going to win, but I think they are a different animal at Murrayfield. They're vulnerable on the road, as we could see in Ireland, as we could see in Wales. We saw it at Twickenham a couple of seasons ago when they conceded 60. We saw it on the road when they lost to Fiji. They lost to America in the summer. But bring them back to Edinburgh, and they are a very formidable side with that crowd behind them.
Yeah, and yet Ireland are still fairly heavy favourites for this. 7 points favourites. That seems mad to me.
Well, why not? I mean, look at what Ireland have done. Ireland have shown that they can go on the road and win big games. Scotland are, on paper, Scotland are an inferior team to Ireland. So I'm not surprised that Ireland are favourites. I think 7 points is fair enough. But this is a trappy one for Ireland. I know Ireland will come over here and they'll be all guns blazing because what happened to them in Twickenham and against England, and Scotland are expecting that, expecting the most humongous backlash. But this is a dangerous one for them. It really is.
I know you were saying that the Scots weren't doing handstands whenever Ireland were drawn against them, but it's kind of the perfect draw for Scotland in looking at it objectively and without that kind of sense of, here's a team who've beaten us a lot. A game not at Murrayfield, but also not a TV event, so therefore probably swings a little bit more towards Scotland than it does to Ireland in Japan. And Ireland with their, psychological barrier at every World Cup. If I was Townsend, I'd be starting to talk about that game now.
No, listen, Townsend won't talk about the France game in a couple of weeks' time, not to mind Japan in a number of months. I promise you that. He has a very singular focus on the next game and the next game and the next game. But he'll get round to that. He's not one to play mind games, nor is Joe Schmidt, obviously. Leave that to Eddie Jones. Because, listen, if he starts to play mind games with Ireland, it can come back and bite him on the backside, and he knows that all too well. Ireland have the capacity to win this game very well. They do. But what's intriguing is that Scotland have the capacity to win it as well. Their chances are reduced by the fact that they're missing their 2 best back row forwards. John Barkley injured, Hamish Watson injured. They're their 2 wreckers in chief. Barkley is an absolute pest at the breakdown, as is Watson. You put those 2 into the back row, you'd almost make it level pegging. But they are missing, and Scotland will miss them.
did want to ask one thing about the standing of Townsend within the Scottish rugby community. There was definitely a sense for a long period of time that unless you were Ian McGeechan, then you had to be a foreigner within Scottish rugby to be properly respected and to get the support of everybody and to be able to unite the clans. Has Townsend managed to get over that post-colonial inferiority complex?
Well, I mean, you talk about foreigners. Yeah, Scotland have had a few foreign coaches, but Vern Cotter would be respected throughout Scotland for what he did. If you go back to a previous foreign coach, Matt Williams, I don't want to be disrespectful, but he wouldn't have the same aura in Scotland as Vern Cotter has. So I think everyone thought it was the right time. A lot of people bemoaned the fact that Cotter was moved on, because I think if they were in a dilemma, the SRU, they knew that if they recommitted to Vern Cotter, who was doing a great job, that Gregor Townsend in all probability would be lost to Scottish rugby. He would have gone to England or he'd have gone to France in a club job, and he might not come back. So they were kind of not forced into appointing him, but it's just circumstances made it the right decision. And now he's been what Scottish people love about Townsend is the way his team plays.
Yeah,
and it's not that they're accepting of failure, but they like what they see. They're being excited. They're getting off their seats. They're singing these tries that appeal to the Scottish psyche. The elan, the gallousness is a Scottish word. They love that flair, and that's going down a storm at Murrayfield, I can tell you.
Yeah, I can see why. Will you give us a prediction for the game?
Oh gosh, that's a horrible question. I think Ireland by 6.
Nice one. Tom, enjoy it. Thanks a million. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks, lad.
Tom English giving us some thoughts there on the game of the weekend.
So according to the bookies, we were more likely to beat England than we are to beat Scotland.
Yeah. There's probably a home and away thing.
Of course there is, yeah.
We'd probably have more. Obviously, could be 14 points probably if it was a home game. Voting is underway for the Players Premier League Player of the Year. Kenny was on the football show last night and he managed to fit 1.5 Irish internationals into his 11. Have a look.
I just feel Declan Rice, forget about the fact, 19, 20 years of age, just come into the team. He played early on the season away to Liverpool, got brought off at half-time. No reflection on his performance, he's one of the better players, but he was the one sacrificed. Had to stay out a couple of games after that, but as soon as Pellegrini reintroduced him into the team in central midfield, I just think his quality performance, week in, week out, has been as good as anything that I've seen in central midfield. So I stand by Declan Rice in midfield alongside Ferrandino. I'm going to put Matt Doherty in there. The players up against him where I'd say... Sorry?
Matt Doherty.
Matt Doherty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's keep it that way.
Matt Doherty, look, you're picking holes. Look. Trippier and Alexander Arnold were the other two up against him. Obviously, he's been on, again, through injury. Alexander Arnold's been taken. He's very close. Trippier, I'm a big fan of as well, particularly is how productive he is in the last third of the pitch. But you can make the same argument for Matt as well. And I know he's been playing in a right wing-back position of sorts. I got him in an orthodox right-back position. But again, probably Matt, for me, at his most productive in the opposition half the pitch. And he's got a good goal return as well, which is a factor as well for a right-back. Another 2 goals last night in the FA Cup. He's had more than a sprinkle of goals in the league. Key goals as well.
Yeah, so there you go. That's Declan Rice 1.5. I mean, he's either 2 or nothing.
Well, I thought that was a sly dig at Matt Doherty there. It's 2 Irishmen. Declan Rice is Irish. Until I hear otherwise, Declan Rice is Irish.
He's got those jerseys in his house.
He does.
Those caps on his head. There's his toddy.
Declan Rice has got his DNA all over that Irish badge.
Robertson, Laporte, Van Dijk, Doherty. I mean, imagine that. Have they got his name right in England yet?
Yeah,
Rice,
they're starting to.
Fernandinho, Hazard, Rashford, Aguero and Sterling. It's not a bad team. I'd have Rice in there ahead of Fernandinho though.
Do you lose a bit with Hazard, Rashford, Aguero and Sterling all in the one team?
He's got Rice in his team, right? And you, sitting here yesterday, was it 2 days ago, before Kenny was here, was like, he's not going to improve Man City's team. Here he is and Kenny could have team of the year.
Would you say Matt Doherty would start over Kyle Walker?
No, I'm talking about Rice.
I know, but the point is, just because you're on the team of the year for that particular season doesn't mean you are the best in that position in the league.
Is Kyle Walker all that? Like, is Kyle Walker the hill you're going to die on? He's like an absolute
No,
genius.
it's just another example that in that team.
It's a great example.
Like,
it's a great example.
Would De Gea start for Manchester City?
Yes. He's the best goalkeeper in the world.
Best shot stopper in the world.
Sorry, you're saying that if Man City had David De Gea...
Like, you got to talk about the specific player that they require and the specific talents of that player in an overall sense. Just, like, your recency bias is really bringing you down here. It's weighing you down.
David De Gea, the recency bias, where he's been really good for, like, 6-7 years.
No, but you're forgetting the idea that Ederson is there as a tactical part of how Manchester City play. And would David De Gea probably get into the Liverpool team? Like, Alisson is still a crucial part of how Liverpool play as well. Like, the thing is, I don't think that's as much of a stick to beat Declan Rice with.
You're using this
right here, right now.
You're saying Declan Rice wouldn't improve Man City's team, and Kenny
right now,
has just put him in the team.
Right now,
he's just put him in the best team in the year.
Like,
he's getting into that
form. Also,
I think Pep Guardiola would probably find a way to use like the best young talent in Europe and turn it into something that he can get out of.
Kenny Cunningham's just trying to get Declan Rice to play for Ireland. That's all. He's like ringing up his buddies afterwards and say, lads, will you watch me on off the ball there tonight? I've picked Declan Rice as one of the best players of the season so far, and he should play for Ireland. I'm an Irish pundit.
He should play for Ireland.
Well, as I said, he's still Irish as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. You can give us your team of the year using the hashtag OTBAM if you want this morning. The big GAA game this weekend is Kerry against Dublin in Tralee on Saturday night. When are you going down?
Friday night.
Oh, Friday night for a night of mayhem on the tiles in Tralee.
Not really, kind of...
To get a scar on the other side of your face.
No, I will not be drinking in Tralee because I'm terrified. No, that's not true. What did you insult?
What did you insult in Tralee?
Nobody, actually. You started to bring that up.
Both the GAA clubs?
No, that was your cover story for my face, that I went down to Tralee and got battered.
After you had said something on the show about Tralee?
No, I said something about Crokes, Dr. Crokes.
What did you say about them?
That nobody likes Dr. Crokes.
Why?
Which is true, because they're so good. Kind of like Dublin. Nobody likes Dublin because they're so good. That wasn't what you said.
You insulted the other club in Tralee.
Dr. Crokes and Killarney.
Okay. But who did you insult?
I'm pretty sure it was them.
There was definitely a Tralee. You said something bad about Tralee.
That Tralee's just a shithole.
Yeah, wasn't that it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, all right. So you're going to Tralee on Friday night?
No, it's not a shithole. It's great. It's actually a fantastic atmosphere for a game. Much better. That's why Dublin should play their league games in Parnell Park. There'll be evidence of that on Saturday night. Smaller ground equals better atmosphere, and Parnell Park has an even bigger capacity. So
we launched our brand new Gaelic football show across all of the Off the Ball platforms yesterday. So YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and of course on offtheball.com. Here's Owen on the tactics board talking through the Kerry setup so far under Peter Keane, revealing the state secrets of Kerry.
So this is where we get into kind of the complicated area of how Kerry are actually setting up. I do think they'll keep the two-man full forward line even without the ball at a certain point. So it's the first minute of the match and Dublin have the ball. I expect them to keep two up front here. What happens then is obviously the midfield will drop back and we'll have Sean O'Shea here who's willing to drop back. But I think these lads will also go back with them. So these will be Darragh Moynihan and Jonathan Lyne, and we will have 13 men behind the ball. And that will be their plan A. They turn over the ball, get a score, and then go 13 men behind the ball again, assuming the build-up is quite slow. But if things start to go a little bit wrong for them, then Stephen O'Brien will drop back, which they've already shown. Or if things continue to go against them, then they will go the full 15 back at that point, which is what we've seen for a huge part of the first game against Cavan, the first half against Cavan last week, and for a decent selection of the game against Tyrone as well. What I do want to just touch on briefly here is the substitutes that Kerry made on Saturday, because they are extremely telling. So the first one was Darragh Moynihan on for Killian Spillane. He's going to start at the weekend. Tommy Walsh came on for Jonathan Lyne. So if you just want to focus on the attack here, Tommy Walsh came in kind of roaming around here every time Kerry had the ball out to the left wing, claimed a couple of marks. He claimed one mark and he put it badly wide, but he claimed another few bouncing balls, actually low ball into the chest, activating runners off the shoulder here, which worked a treat for Kerry late on. So Tommy Walsh going out to the wing worked very well. We had Mark Griffin on for Diarmuid O'Connor, which was a very interesting one.
Formerly full back.
Myself and my Kerry Mafia comrades who go to all the games, our personal endeavour is to see Mark Griffin play midfield for Kerry, because we've seen him. You'll have seen him in the big games. Gets the ball, bursts out of the back. Like Tommy Griffin, exactly. I want to see him out. Like the half-back line at the moment for Kerry is quite a strong position with Morley O'Sullivan, Obiog League, so I can't see him there, but potentially as a midfielder, because, and this is the key part, Peter Keane loves to play a third midfielder in all his teams over the past couple of years, and that made this substitute very, very interesting.
Wow, well, the blood is up. You've never been more excited about a tactical formation in your life, Owen.
I'm very excited about all tactical formations.
But specifically what Kerry are doing right now, it's like out Tyroning Tyrone. It's like your wettest of wet dreams, finally.
There's a sight.
You mean when we out Kerry Tyrone in 2012?
After they were finished. That time.
After they were finished.
When Tyrone were no good anymore.
They were just getting started.
When they were no longer the team of the decade. When they were the team of the previous decade. Darren, how are you?
Very well, Jeff.
Well, Darren, how are you?
I'm good.
Dublin ruining the GAA. It's now official. It's official.
I mean, if
that Dublin have boarded everybody
into
into submission, costed £4 million to the association.
All Dublin's fault.
Absolutely. Well, Dublin and Mayo. Don't forget Mayo.
Do you want to apologise to everybody?
I should apologise, should I? I'm so sorry that Dublin have revolutionised Gaelic football, played it better than anyone else, and that has bored you. Are you not entertained? That's it.
Perfect. Jim Gavin should just come out in one of those leather coats and nothing else. Going, are you not entertained? With the head of I don't know.
James Horn.
One of that great Kerry who didn't do 5 in a row. On a platter. He's on second.
Well, obviously not Peter Keane, who just completed a 5 in a row. The only manager in the GAA at the moment who's looked after 5 in a row. It's a good old feeling. It's great. It's like you're going to really enjoy this. If Dublin win 5 in a row, it really does feel sweet to be supporting a county that's completed 5 in a row.
I'm glad you said if, because the foregone conclusion thing makes me really, really uncomfortable.
But it's just... What was the line?
It's written down on paper, it must be true.
Probable victory. Well, it's written down in the financial report.
Perceived results and probable results.
Yeah. Probable
perceived
and
outcome.
perceived. Yeah.
That's the buzzword. So there is a perceived outcome that Dublin are going to win Leinster, and there is a perceived outcome that Dublin will win the league, and there's a perceived outcome that Dublin will win the championship.
Well, there's an acknowledgement that they are nailed on to win Leinster, and that they are nailed on to qualify from the Super 8s. That's the whole point. None of those games have any jeopardy in them, really, except maybe the away game in Oma last year. Just on the gate receipts, right? There was 2 major replays in 2017, which added an extra 2 million to the receipts. So the 4 million deficit, roughly, from 34.3 to 29.5, nearly 5 million. It's not that big a deal because the 29.5 is still bigger than pretty much every year before 2016. So not that big a deal.
And they weren't sellouts either. It was Mayo versus Kerry and Mayo versus Roscommon the previous year, and then last year it was Galway versus Kilkenny in the Leinster hurling final.
The Dubs were involved against Mayo.
No, Mayo against Kerry 2 years ago. It's 16 then. If you go back to 16, then you got replay in the All-Ireland final.
Yeah. And wasn't there a replay All-Ireland hurling final? Anyway, the point was that the 29.5 million is still well ahead of almost every year prior to 2016. So they're doing grand. The gate receipts are not that big a story. The biggest story is that they're doing unbelievably well and they've loads of money.
I'm not sure about that. I think it is a fairly sizable story.
Which?
The gate receipts.
How is it?
The gate receipts are reducing despite the fact that there's extra games.
But sorry, they're not.
But there's not extra games.
And they're also not reducing. So they're not. If you take
there's Super 8s and.
But you take it against. They made more money.
You're thinking of the hurling in Munster and Leinster is separate.
Sorry, the Super 8s. Are they not included in the Super 8s as well?
Super 8s are included.
Yeah, but so not a huge amount of more games. And anyway, 2018 they made 29 million. 2015 they made 26 million. 2014 29. 2013 29. 2012 26. Like loads of. It's exactly the same. It's the same pattern. It's not. There's like that one aberration in 2017 when they had the big replays. So I think that everybody's going to get a little bit distracted by the gate receipts and not try and find where the rest of the money is and how well it's being distributed. Like the Croke Park is obviously being unbelievably well run. It's making 11 million profit before tax, and they have enough money to be able to consider buying the Clonliffe Road site and developing that. So, like, clearly the organisation is on an unbelievably firm financial footing. The fact that they lost some gate receipts in the first year of the Super 8s, I think if we overreact to that and just talk about that as opposed to the piles of cash that they're building up.
What about the average attendance?
Yeah, but they spin positively as well, in that John Horan was out last week, obviously knowing that this was coming out, and was saying that season ticket sales are up on last year and that the first round of the league had more bums on seats than the year previous. So while there was bad news this week, I don't think it's overly anything that they're probably panicking about. I think they said yesterday that they didn't think that there would be as big a bounce in the Super 8s as other people did. They didn't expect to make a big windfall in the Super 8s.
The average attendance is down though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's down to, I obviously don't have the figures in front of me there, but...
Down 18% in the championship.
Like 18% is a...
That's just the All-Ireland series. That's not the provincial championship.
Yeah, like I know that
and
we've
the All-Ireland series is where the problem is because the football hasn't been competitive, and it certainly wasn't last year.
I know we've got to wait another year or two for this to actually see if there's a proper trend here. But ultimately, all trends have to start somewhere, and I'd be a little bit concerned about that, to be quite honest with you. Even if you say it's not as big a story as you think. I think this could become a big story. If we were looking at this in 12 months' time...
Neither Kerry nor Mayo made the All-Ireland semi-finals last year.
Sure, no, Kerry don't travel, did they?
But like they might for semi-final against Dublin.
They definitely would for semi-final against
Dublin.
The 3 years ago, Croke Park was packed, 70,000 for semi-final against Dublin.
Yeah, I guess so. But like that's half Dublin fans as well who actually showed up for a game that's meaningful to them. And maybe Kerry and Mayo bring that, and that's kind of a double-edged sword. But there, as was it Mikey Sheehy last year said that they couldn't hear any Kerry fans for the replay against Mayo 2 years ago, and that's one of the replays that they're citing.
As having had a lot of people at it.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact attendance, but I presume Mayo were there in millions and millions and millions as they always are.
I thought it was interesting that in his comments he tried to clarify, this is Jeremy Ryan, he tried to clarify that the money that Dublin get is not all spent dedicated to the Dublin senior football team. I think there is a bit of a misconception that when Dublin get 1.5 million that just goes to the county board. A lot of it's on games development officers, which the Dublin clubs and every club that uses that money has to foot 50% of the bill to pay for.
Yeah, I would assume almost none of it goes to the senior inter-county team, right?
No, Galway had the highest dividend that went to their senior inter-county teams last year, and that was obviously because they got to an All-Ireland semi-final and All-Ireland hurling final as well.
Okay,
so they had more money that went directly to the senior team than anyone else.
But the Games Development Funds obviously is an indirect way of...
Yeah, absolutely. It should be addressed. Like, I don't think there's anyone looking at the funds and saying that Dublin's ability to generate their own money should mean they should get less money now.
But there should certainly be a conversation about it. Or, like, here's the thing. If the money going to Dublin to pay for games development officers doesn't go to pay for games development officers, then GAA in the capital won't succeed. The knock-on impact of that is that the senior team starts to do really well, and the industrialisation of the process of young talent coming through gets looked after. But that doesn't mean that you should stop spending on developing the young talent and giving kids access to good quality coaching. It's a model that should be rolled out as much as you possibly can.
That was the point he made. That was the point Mulrine made yesterday. He said instead of stripping down and going backwards and trying to remove that advantage that Dublin have enjoyed from having those structures in place and using the funds in the way they have, we'd like to roll it out to other places. So instead of saying, oh, this works for one team, let's stop it, let's try and make it work for other people. And that would make an awful lot of sense if they decided to divvy up the games development funds in a meaningful way that allowed these... They're in essence recruiters. They go into areas and try and get kids to play Gaelic games, Gaelic football and hurling. Yeah. So important nowadays because they are battling with rugby, with soccer and with PlayStations, with everything.
They're battling with gymnastics and karate and and the park run, and they're actually battling with a million other things that are happening in urban areas that, like, when we were kids in Athy, there was rugby training on one night, there was soccer training, there was hurling training, and there was football training, and you went to everything because that was all there was to do. Whereas now, my kids can do whatever the hell they like, and if they don't like something once, you're like, we're still going because you're going to have to go because we think it's good for you. But like, over a period of time, eventually the pester power starts to pay to work. So, but there is access in the schools because there's a good games development officer coming to the schools and they continue to play. Like, if that money gets withdrawn and the link with the schools is broken, then the system breaks down. And so this is really working. And instead of us going, well, it's screwing up the championship, we should try and fix the championship and see these two things as interlinked, but definitely separate issues that we're trying to fix at the same time.
The problem is it's working just for Dublin because they have had the lion's share of it and they have managed to invest it in a way where their money hasn't been diverted in capital grants to upgrading county grounds in the same way that Kildare have had to and that Cork have had to.
Kildare did not run their finances properly, and Croke Park had to step in, and that was unconnected to what happened around Newbridge. But just before we go on, because Niall Quinn was at a public meeting that Aon O'Riordan organised on Monday night, I think, in the Beachcomber, talking about his vision for Irish football. Emma Malone was there and a couple of others were there too, talking about how grassroots and how football needs to get political and influence the political class to funnel investment their way, which is all a fair point. But one of the things that he said was, why don't we do deals like the MLS do, where it's the same kit supplier for all of the teams, and so Nike are the official supplier, or Umbro or whoever it might be for the international team is also for all of the teams, and all of the jerseys are all produced by the same company, and then whoever sells the most amount of jerseys doesn't make money just for that club, it makes money for everybody. The same thing, if it was applied to GAA, would in the morning completely revolutionise the funding, and it would also mean that all of the counties are invested in helping whatever apparel company happens to come in, and so everybody's wearing the Nike swoosh, or everybody's wearing the Three Stripes, or everybody's wearing the O'Neills if it continues to be O'Neills, fair enough. But giving Dublin the opportunity to sell 100,000 shirts or 500,000 shirts or 5 million shirts is never going to result in anything other than them making all the money, and there's loads of different ways you can actually think about this as a collective.
Instead of focusing on the needs of the few, focus on the needs of the many.
That makes sense.
Manchester City are back on top of the Premier League table after defeating Everton 2-0 last night. City's superior goal difference over Liverpool saw them clinch top spot for the first time since December. Liverpool, though, have a game in hand and they will need to draw or win against Bournemouth at the weekend to overtake their title rivals. Manager Pep Guardiola thrilled to be on top but not getting too comfortable.
Well, it's better. It's better to be there, but we have one more game. So we have to wait till Liverpool when it's going to be in Anfield. The game is going to recover what is going to happen. So still a lot of games to play. Especially in the first half, we made very good actions. We didn't finish. We had 2 or 3 clear. And in the second half, it was a little more difficult because they push more, they press more. But the important is we create enough chances to score more goals. And the last 7, 8, 10 minutes, we play so good these minutes. And yeah, 3 more points and keep going. Still a lot of games to play, and many things is going to happen.
Now, the Leinster duo of Rob Kearney and Sean O'Brien are set to be recalled to the Ireland team for Saturday's Six Nations showdown with Scotland at Murrayfield. Reports claim Kearney will be reinstated to full back while Robbie Henshaw moves to centre to replace the injured Gary Ringrose. O'Brien looks set to take the place of Josh van der Fleer on the flank. Injury opens the door as well for Quinn Rue and Jack Conan to come in for Devon Toner and CJ Stander. The Ireland scrum coach Greg Feek is confident fans will see an improvement on the performance.
Part of it is just coming back to being Irish, to being Ireland and playing like we have done. And there's probably parts of the weekend that didn't show it, and it was certainly our focus is, in all due respect, England played well, but we have to turn the page, and we can't undo that, what happened, and all we can do now is focus on our accuracy and our preparation for this week, and that's our sole focus. And the players know as much as what you guys do and what we do, what we need to work on, and you've only got a couple of training runs to cover, so you just get what you need to get right done.
Shane Lowry flies the flag for Ireland at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am in California today. The Offaly man will be aiming to continue the form that saw him win the Abu Dhabi Championship 3 weeks ago and claim a 12th place finish at the Dubai Desert Classic as well. Elsewhere on the European Tour, Gavin Moynihan and Michael Hoey both lie on 500 par after the opening round of the Vic Open in Australia. The pair 5 shots behind the 2-stroke leader Nick Flanagan. A body has been recovered from the wreckage of the plane that crashed with Cardiff City footballer Emiliano Sala on board. It's not yet known if the remains are that of Sala or the pilot David Botson. The AAIB used a remotely operated underwater vehicle to aid the search and was able to recover the single body previously seen in the wreckage. They say efforts to recover the crashed plane as a whole proved unsuccessful before being abandoned due to bad weather. French club Nantes have demanded payment from Cardiff City of the €17 million transfer fee for Sala. The Premier League club have expressed surprise that Nantes want payment while the search operation and recovery operation is still ongoing. It is unclear whether or not the club have insurance covering the cost of that transfer. It's reported the French club are threatening legal action if they do not receive payment within 10 days. Well, racing has been cancelled at all courses in the UK today due to an outbreak of equine flu. The British Horse Racing Authority announced the decision to cancel meetings at 4 venues after 3 animals from a single yard tested positive for the virus. The BHA warned that horses from the yard race at Ayr and Ludlow yesterday potentially exposing other animals, including some from Irish yards, to the risk of infection. There were multiple Irish runners at both meetings.
Yeah, this is a huge story, obviously, because what are we, 5 weeks out, 5 weeks out from Cheltenham? So they've got to get a grip of this really quickly, otherwise there could be devastation ahead of the festival. Yeah,
it's apparently a very, very contagious virus and spreads very easily, so there'd be concern anyway that any horse that was alongside one of the infected horses or two of the infected horses could have actually picked up the infection.
All right, good stuff, Darren. We'll keep an eye on that and everything else on offtheball.com for the rest of the day. Now, we've been speaking with the USA Anti-Doping Authority, USADA CEO, Travis Tygart, about a whole bunch of topics. Obviously, Travis Tygart was centrally involved in taking down Lance Armstrong and has become something of a controversial figure in anti-doping worldwide. Owen got a good 40-minute conversation with him a little earlier on in the week. We'll put the whole thing up on YouTube, but here's the first part that we're going to play you this morning. Have a look.
So it's been a pretty eventful couple of months when it comes to the anti-doping sphere, with WADA finally getting their hands on that data from the now infamous anti-doping lab in Moscow. So as we understand, WADA are currently working on the information retrieved, and Russia, for the time being, have avoided any further sanctions. And that's currently the state of play at the moment in that particular story. And the CEO of USADA, Travis Tygart, has been particularly vocal on the subject, and I'm delighted to welcome him to the show this morning. Good morning to you, Travis. How are things?
Hey, things are good, Owen. Thanks for having us.
Not at all. So you said around a month ago that WADA were being played by the Russians, and you said confidence in WADA has never been lower. I presume nothing has changed over the last month to change that stance.
Yeah, I think that's right. Listen, I think it's a good step. We've gotten something out of the Russian lab. It was past the deadline, and again, WADA, let up on its obligation to enforce the rules as it otherwise should have. The second, third, fourth time, but we got something. Now, look, we don't know what we've got. Is it authentic? Is it genuine? Is it actually the evidence that, originally was about 9,000 presumptive positive samples related to 4,500 athletes? So now they're in the process of verifying that, seeing what evidence is there, and then ultimately going to have to decide on individual cases that should be brought. And we'll see how that ultimately plays out. And then also keep in mind, there's still several thousand from what has been previously reported samples. So the actual urine that is still there that could be retested of some of these athletes is still in the laboratory. The USADA, the Russian anti-doping agency head, said that's going to be difficult to turn over. And that deadline is coming up here pretty soon in the next several months, this summer, actually. So we'll see what ultimately happens, and hopefully cases will be brought and the truth will be ultimately revealed, and sanctions where they should be put in place will ultimately be put in place.
You say hopefully. How confident are you in WADA to actually execute it?
Listen, I think the IOC really since day one has wanted to put this in the rearview mirror. It's bad for business when a superpower cheats at the level that we now know Russia cheated at. And that's been verified in report after report after report after report. And the IOC controls WADA to a large extent. And really going back since the first media exposure of this state-sponsored doping in December of 2014, the IOC and WADA have been trying to put this in the rearview mirror. So we're overly skeptical, as we should be, because we've seen the action, which is to say one thing publicly, severest of all consequences will be put in place. If you remember, the IOC said, if these allegations turn out to be true, it's an unprecedented level of criminality and attack on the Olympic Games. And certainly it is. Can you imagine winning the bid, hosting the Olympic Games on your territory, on your soil, and then using your military and your intelligence divisions to tap into the collection kits, the Berlinger bottle, which are not, unfortunately have shown to be not tamper proof, pour out dirty urine, replace it with clean urine, seal the caps, have it go through the laboratory, reported as it was reported. Ultimately go from a 7th place finish the Russians did in the Vancouver Winter Olympic Games to 1st place on their home soil in Sochi. Now we realize why, because they cheated their way to the top. That's been exposed, that's been proven, and yet we're still here many years later trying to find an appropriate consequence, an appropriate reform and justice for those athletes who have been robbed by it.
Yeah,
it's simply unacceptable.
Like, do you think then, taking that to its final conclusion, that there should be some sort of separation between WADA and IOC explored over the next couple of years, and perhaps the role of Sir Craig Reedy himself might be under threat?
We've been, you mentioned it in the introduction, vocal when asked for one reason. Our athletes and athletes around the world have come to us and have said, Travis, USADA, we're happy to be held to the highest standard. You come, other countries in Ireland, they go to their athletes' homes, their training centers. They, can't, they're worried about what meat they can eat. They're worried about what supplements they can take. If they fail to file their whereabouts form on any given day and aren't at home on the hour that they say they're going to be at home for out of competition, no advance notice testing, athletes can get the severest of all sanctions. They can lose their opportunity to compete, make a living, represent their country at the highest levels on one, strike. They're fine holding themselves to that standard because they want to be seen as real live champions and people that we can actually honor as real heroes. The problem is when they show up at international competitions like they did at the Sochi Winter Olympic Games, like they did at the London 2012 Olympic Games, like they have in World Championships for many years, and get robbed by countries who aren't playing by the very rules that they're playing and being held to, that's when the whole system falls apart.
Sure.
So we've had two mandates from our athletes. Number one, justice. Any individual who was robbed by state-sponsored doping ought to be made whole. Their medals ought to be reallocated, and we ought to do everything to celebrate their victories, not the cheaters who won in those cases. And that takes evidence, and that takes a legal process to get to that determination. The second, and to your question, absolutely reform has been on the forefront. We have to reform the World Anti-Doping Agency to make it not a service provider to the International Olympic Committee, but a global watchdog that is free of the political influence when it comes time to enforcing the rules. The rule enforcer has to be sacrosanct. It can't be influenced by political decisions or an interest in the outcome of how those rules are enforced. And that's what we've been talking about really since December 2014 when this first arose. And our athletes, as well as our sports federations, came to us and said, what are we going to do about this?
Okay, so this is a really wide-ranging interview that ends up going a bunch of different places, and we'll talk about some of the issues that have arisen from what Travis has been saying there in a couple of minutes' time. But we want to bring you this bit because here we are talking about the state of doping, particularly the case of the UFC light heavyweight champion Jon Jones. Have a look at this.
Does that mean it's like it was in the 90s? I think not. Does it mean we have to continue to give clean athletes support and a system that is going to have their back? Absolutely. It's too important to go the other way.
I get that, and I get the idea that people who've cheated in the past are often very valuable commodities, and it just kind of brings me on when I saw that you said that doping is never justified and always inexcusable. It just immediately triggered with me the current case, which is quite close to home for you at the moment, which is with the UFC and with Jon Jones, who of course tested positive for 2 banned substances in 2016, and then we have the turinabol finding from 2017, which is obviously flared up over the last month. He's a guy who's tested positive for banned substances, and he's fighting in a sport where he can do serious damage to your opponent. How do you tally that with your own idea that doping is never justified and always inexcusable?
Yeah, look, it's you have to look at each individual case. And let me be real clear on the quote. Look, people in systems try to say and justify their doping by everyone was doing it and that made it okay. And that's the point with the Brunel case and the cycling cases. Stand up, have the courage to say, you know what, it's against the rules. It's not okay. It's not justified. I think we all, as people, can attempt to justify whatever we do when it comes time to decision making. But the rules are the rules. Play by the rules, even if it means you might have to leave the sport, you might have to leave the sport. Hopefully that's not the answer, because look, there are independent organizations here today that have your back, that are all going to fairly enforce the rules and ensure that your right to compete clean is upheld. So to Jon Jones, listen, that's exactly what happened. He got a 15-month suspension through the arbitration panel for an inadvertent doping violation. There was no intentional cheating. And an independent
how did we actually come to that conclusion, Travis? Because obviously Richard McLaren was involved and says that there was no intentional ingestion of turinabol. For a guy who's previously served a doping violation, to give him the benefit of the doubt there seems really strange.
Well, you have to look at the evidence. Like, it's not what you feel or what you think. Look at the evidence.
But where's the evidence that he took it non-deliberately? Like, obviously there's no evidence to suggest he took it deliberately, but if I'm looking at a guy who's previously served the doping suspension, I'm not really giving that guy the benefit of the doubt that he took it accidentally.
Listen, nobody gave any athlete any benefit of the doubt other than what the facts and the evidence shows. And the evidence was clear, and all the scientific opinion that was presented to the independent arbitrator was clear that there was no intent to dope, because if you look at the negative tests where there was no M3, which is not parent drug, which is not the M1 drug, not the M2 metabolite, only the M3, it was at a minuscule level shortly after negative tests, and then negative tests before the small finding. So the evidence, the scientific,
but it's still a positive test.
But that wasn't the question you asked me. The question you asked me was, how can you say it wasn't intentional? And yes, it was an adverse analytical finding. It was reported, and it went through the results process. But we do an individual analysis in every case. Was it an intentional cheating? And if it was, they would have gotten the full maximum sanction, just as we've applied in every other case. But look, we had a 90-year-old cyclist test positive for minuscule trace amounts of a drug that can come in meat.
Yeah, and he got a ban.
We investigated it and came out with, he got a public warning. So Jones got 15 months because the evidence, the negative test before, the negative test immediately after, showed that there was no way he took an intentional dose to enhance his performance, because the test result would have been much higher than the test result that was bookended by a negative and a positive test. So, look, we're here to fairly enforce the rules, but we're not going to hang a guy up just because of a contamination or an inadvertent positive, just like in the meat contamination case. Just look, we announced a water contamination case. We announced a medication contaminated case. That's how a fair system operates. Like, we're gonna throw the book where we have authority at intentional cheats, but we're also going to be fair and just to people who have positive tests that aren't indicative and demonstrate that they weren't intentionally cheating.
Yeah,
I think that's the essence of a fair system.
Sure. Like, to be fair, there was a negative test regarding Jones on December 29th from USADA, but oddly, on the very same day, he was tested by Wada and he came up positive. How can you be confident in the testing system when he was tested on the same night and one test shows up as negative, one test shows up as positive from two different organizations?
So he tested positive the day before and then a negative that day because of his specific gravity, which is the amount of water that's in your system. At these really, 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 really low levels, specific gravity can affect the lab's ability to see these trace amounts or not. And I think the test you're referring to, I don't have the dates in front of me, but I think the test you're referring to was the weigh-in date where he had lost significant amount of water weight, and the drug was there again at these really low picogram levels. And then the next day when we tested him before the fight, he had obviously, put weight back on and had drunk a lot of water, and so it wasn't in there. And that, if you followed the case and looked at the evidence, is clearly consistent with the scientific determination of why one on that day was positive at that low level and then negative the next day.
Sure. Like, it is an interesting philosophical one, and I think why we get so exercised about it is because it is combat sports. You can do severe damage to your opponent, and you look at some of the other combat sports and the Canelo Alvarez situation. I know it's not you guys, it was Wada who tested Canelo Alvarez, and due to that Ken Butterall finding a couple of months ago for that ban. But then you look at the USADA one over Eric Morales in 2012 being allowed to fight despite testing positive beforehand. I guess just my question to you, Travis, is if you think you fail a test once as a combat sports competitor, do you think you should be allowed back into the ring or the octagon once again, given the inherent dangers?
Yeah, look, if you intentionally cheat and a positive test demonstrates that, you ought to be thrown out. And athletes in certain sports, push for lifetime bans on one offense. That said, if you don't intentionally cheat, but you have a positive test and there's no performance benefit that's been given, I don't think you should be thrown out of the sport for really any period of time. I mean, eating a piece of meat that is contaminated with a drug at such a low level that it had no impact on your performance, is it fair? You would be asking me, is it fair to keep them out of sport? And I would agree that it's not fair. You know, having the Therese Johaug case, for example, out of Norway, a skier who used a lip balm that contained a really, really low level of prohibited substance, caused her to have a positive test, but she was out of competition, had no impact on her performance. She got a 16-month suspension and lost her opportunity to go to the Winter Olympic Games. Is that a right outcome? Look, I don't think it is. I don't think that's a fair system. So to answer your question, if you intentionally cheat, you ought to be thrown out of sport. But if you have a positive test that is not intentional cheating and gave you no performance enhancement because water or a supplement or meat or a lip balm caused it, I don't think you should get any suspension.
And you don't think combat sports should be held to a higher standard?
Look, I think for sure, combat and every sport within the Olympic movement should be held to the highest standard. But again, no performance enhancement benefit. There's no health or safety issue. The positive test is not from anything that you intentionally did to try to gain a performance advantage. Look, I think the system is that hammers 16 months for a Therese Johaug for a lip balm is not a fair system. Someone that eats meat, right, served in a restaurant that has a positive test that receives a sanction, I don't think that's a really fair system, whether you're in a combat sport or not.
Sure. We are speaking to you today, Travis, just the morning after the Super Bowl, and I know USADA doesn't look after the NFL. They do look after their own testing, and I'm sure your eyebrows would have been raised last night seeing the MVP, Julian Edelman, picking up his MVP title. Of course, he served a 4-game ban at the start of the season for performance-enhancing drugs. What's your take on that?
Yeah, look, I don't know the facts of the case. I mean, we've all often said, all sport ought to be independent, and you ought to be able to see the arbitrator's decision of exactly what was behind that. 4-game ban, we've been very vocal, is not, the kind of deterrent that you would want. This case may be Exhibit A, that it's not the kind of deterrent that you want. And there ought to be, penalties in place that provide for the type of offense, given what we just talked about, for the type of offense that actually provide that deterrent. So athletes aren't going to, intentionally cheat or make risky behavior. I don't know what was the cause of his positive test.
Yeah, it hasn't been out there, it seems, which is a strange one. Maybe if you guys took over the testing for NFL, there'd be kind of more of a transparency. Like, have you explored that idea? I know the NBA, MLB, correct me if I'm wrong here, and the NHL all have their own in-house testing. Like, have USADA explored the idea of actually getting involved with this? Because it seems that the in-house testing is just a free pass, basically. You serve your ban, you don't actually know what they served the ban for, and you come back and you can play for the rest of the season, and it turns out become MVP in the biggest game of them all.
Yeah, look, we've pushed. I mean, I've testified half a dozen times along with both the players' associations as well as the commissioners in those leagues on Capitol Hill here in the United States to say, Fox guarding the hen house, you have to make it independent. You have to give transparency and openness, whether it's written decisions like in this situation or otherwise, in order to gain the confidence, but also ensure that athletes know what their rights are and have a real opportunity to compete on a level playing field. That said, we do work with some of them from time to time, have a partnership on research, and I'd put, Major League Baseball's program against any program in the world. They're doing numerous tests, blood, urine, have an investigative unit, use the top labs. They're doing a heck of a job with their program. They have, I think it's 80-game suspension, which is a significant part of the season for certain offenses, and can go up from there depending on the nature of the violation. But again, make it independent, be transparent with the decisions, and these kind of questions go away. And to me, that is a pro-player position, and you would love to see, while the Major League Baseball Players Association has been really good on this issue, given their problems in the past, the other player associations have been largely silent on this issue, and that's a real problem for the players, I think.
That's Travis Tygart of USADA talking with Owen just a couple of days ago about a range of topics. There's loads more in that interview. It's a full 40 minutes of Travis Tygart talking about everything from Lance to Landis as well. Those bits you can get on youtube.com/off the ball. So they talk about US Postal and Floyd Landis, Lance Armstrong, Jon Jones, and state doping in Russia, the state of Wada as well. So loads of good stuff for you to get your teeth into there. Yeah. What do you think of anti-doping?
To me, what do I think of anti-doping? As in, is it... Well, like it's... We've seen from many cases over the past 2 decades that the dopers will always be ahead of the anti-dopers on a kind of intuition level in terms of maybe the technology they have due to more money, or I don't know why that is the case, but like USADA do get a fairly large slice of a financial pie every year. I think their funding is in the millions. It's not as weak as it is in some other countries. And the question marks over USADA has always been, what do they do on their own doorstep while they're actually going on about Russia? And we get into that a little bit later on, and Tygart says in his defence that he's been accused of being anti-American previously in terms of his pursuit of US Postal, and the cynic would suggest that US Postal worked out really well for Travis Tygart, that there is this example that he can always go back to, that he took down Lance Armstrong and he took down Landis and US Postal, and he has that to now suggest to everybody that, you know, I can't be shown as being pro-American, or I can't be seen as anti-Russian or anything like that. So I don't know, there's part of me that has my doubts about it. There's part of me that there is also everybody who's working in anti-doping at the moment is in a helpless situation, and that's always been the case. And that's the reality once we open up our eyes to the idea that the anti-doping authorities will always be behind the dopers. Miles behind. Well, I think so. It's currently it's hard to know. Currently,
you can always just find a meldonium type thing which is legal that gives you an performance enhancement, and so just move on the next time when they change that, when they change the rules, you get something different, something better. It's too easy.
Yeah, like the meldonium solution is good, but like we have to be asking ourselves questions is, if we're talking about uber levels of doping here, we're talking about Lance Armstrong levels, and we're talking about the EPO and police sport around the world.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Probably in football, more than likely in football.
The performance enhancement you get off this sort of stuff, because working in a lot of areas. Second of all, it really is a case that every one of these cases is broken omerta.
All the way back to Balco stuff, and I'm going to send it to a lab, and all of a sudden the whole case gets blown open.
Or if you're stupid enough to leave it up.
But don't kneel before the flag. We're going to ruin your career for that. That's it.
It's and it is all American sports. Baseball as bad, basketball perhaps even worse, because we see nothing really on a basketball level, to be honest with you. And there would certainly be cases where you're like, that's sensational given the length of the season and the ages that people go on to play at a very, very high level. So I don't know, it will be extremely telling if USADA suddenly had control of all those anti-doping operations, but that will never happen.
All right, before we finish, FA Cup hero and Carlo star Pádraig Amon joined the lads in the football show last night to talk about his latest heroics in the Cup. This features an amazing coaching story as well. Have a look.
I guess your first thought when that ball comes is probably stay calm, do not blast this over.
Yeah, it's funny because the night before, because I coached the under-16s at Newport, I was coaching the striker to do that kind of movement for a ball that's being cut back, and telling him all the things you should be doing. And when it was coming across, it's weird how everything slows down, and in your head all these things are coming. You're like, oh, please don't miss-hit this now after trying to tell that young fella what to do last night. Don't make a mistake here. But then the second I touched the ball, time completely slowed down, and I knew it was in before anyone else did, and it was right in the top corner. It was the sweetest I've ever connected with a football, and probably the best goal I've ever scored.
Yeah, and one of the biggest, I'm sure. So they face Manchester City in the next round of the FA Cup, and the mind games have already started. City aren't going to like Newport County's pitch. It's not quite Porky Cree's pitch, but certainly their head coach, I think, or one of the powers that be, one of the Alakadoos at Newport County, Newport probably don't have that many Alakadoos, was saying, Premier League players, they're going to be looking at this pitch going, we've got a title race here, Pep. Do I really need to go out there and, risk my cruciate ligament? Is that what you want from me, Pep?
They could just say when they show up and it's just mud and there's no grass whatsoever that, oh, sorry, we left the sprinklers on by accident for the last month.
Yeah.
That just happened. But in actual fact, it is those alacadoos just around with a hose, turning everything into mush for the entire thing. What would happen if it was just mush? If it was just mud and there was no grass whatsoever for Manchester City to play on?
Play the game.
I think Newport County would have every chance of winning that encounter.
Do you think there's any chance that the pitch gets that it becomes so pronounced that Man City are looking at it going, we don't really need this. We're going to win the Champions League. We're going to win the league. We don't really need this.
The treble is an attractive thing.
Yeah.
20 years on from Manchester United's treble.
That'd be good, wouldn't it?
And it just marked the anniversary beautifully.
Knock them off their effing perch.
Yeah, it'd be nice. So,
they need a Champions League to knock Man United off their effing perch properly.
Paul Drugamond and Carlo in general have the power to stop somebody matching the treble from Manchester United. So, I think just turn on those sprinklers right now and turn it into a mud bath.
Yeah, all right, good stuff. That's pretty much our show today. Coming up on Off the Ball tonight is John Giles, Andy Dunn and Kevin Kilban. That's live from 7 o'clock on the radio on News Talk tonight. The hurling show, 4 o'clock this afternoon across all the OTB channels. Shane Stapleton hosting alongside Michael Verney and Will O'Callaghan. There's a lot of Offaly men in that panel. Really? There'll be a lot of Offaly talk and a lot of Glory Days talk.
Well, or are they going to...
Wellington and Wheelahan, Donaghy.
You know the way there's like a big 8 in hurling and then that 9th spot is just reserved for Offaly. Carlo have taken over that 9th mantle, so I hope that the Offaly boys actually own up to that fact this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. I'm sure there's nothing like a bit of speaking truth to power. Those Offaly lads are good for it. We're back tomorrow morning from 7:45 a.m. We'll see you then. Good luck.